This is a post I came across on Instagram today as I was browsing it, and this is basically a person asking ChatGPT what the pros and cons of each religion are, and so as with any ChatGPT generated answer, it can be very misinformed, right? And of course, this is also very misinformed. And it's important to understand how it's misinformed, in my opinion, because, okay, so I do a lot of Buddhist practices, right? But to be completely honest with you, the practices are not really, when it comes to making an impact for the amount of effort kind of invested. I think correctly understanding Buddhism tends to just relieve so much of your suffering, and what's remaining, the sticky ones, the karma related suffering, is what you cleanse, what you wash away using the practices that I do. But just having the right understanding around Buddhism can really help you around your suffering, and this output is very misinformed. So I wanted to talk a little bit about how it's misinformed and what it's actually like. So the pro of Buddhism is that apparently it offers a clear inner path to end suffering through mindfulness and detachment. But this isn't really the whole picture. Mindfulness, detachment cover two things of the three poisons. So mindfulness is the answer to anger, which is one poison. Detachment is the answer to greed or desire, which is which is another poison. And the third poison is ignorance. We don't have the correct understanding of the world. We think, more importantly, we think our understanding of reality is the reality. Therefore, I think people shouldn't act like that. But they do, because in reality, they have freedom, right? I think it shouldn't be this hot. But reality is, it's gonna be hot if, the climate's gonna do whatever the climate does, right? So just like this, when we are misinformed, when we have ignorance, that tends to compound suffering. So that's why the antidote to that poison is wisdom. So Buddhism is about cultivating those three antidotes to the three poisons. And this is just a subsection of Buddhism, right? Okay. So the cons of a Buddhism is denies their creator. So just because something denies our creator, does it mean that it's a con? So that is kind of that needs a little bit of examination, right? That means acknowledging a creator is a pro. But why does Buddhism have a beef with this particular topic? So regardless of whether it's a pro or con, why does Buddhism tend to deny a creator? It's because Buddhism was developed as a response to a very dogmatic creator and the higher being oriented religion and a culture and a way of life. In following this tradition of belief, it is told that as long as you are born into the right class of people, it is told that as long as you cultivate a lot of good in this lifetime, some things are determined to go that way. So if I am born a higher, being, then I didn't do anything, but I deserve all the good in the world. I don't need to do anything. And if I'm born a low being, then I need to do all these things in order to, pay for my sins in the past life. And so there's a lot of meaninglessness behind the current life outside of investing for the next one. So suppose I am born in the next one. Then is that life meaningful? No, you have to keep investing and living for the next life again. So in Buddha's time, there has been a continuous loop of people constantly not living the life that they are presented with at the moment because they are too invested in the past and the future life. And because of that came a lot of suffering. And Buddha thought, are we truly destined to this type of suffering? But Buddha was largely about suffering itself, right? Not just religious suffering and suffering that comes from belief. Therefore, he sat down to think about all the different origins of suffering, but a primary motivator is this idea that I am of a certain class and that is destined by the creator. And that leaves a lot of inconsistencies around if I am a higher, state, if I am a higher, class, then why do I still suffer? Why am I still subject to death and life? And shouldn't it be bulletproof? Shouldn't I just be experiencing complete happiness? And so on. This is how the argument developed. So, leaves the origin and meaning of existence unanswered. This is really misinformed because this implies that origin and the meaning of existence needs to be explained. Why this is kind of not a well-informed argument is because origin of something is constantly looped back. Because the origin of something is followed by another origin of something, and it's followed by another origin of something, and you repeat this ad infinitum. Existence is a constant reformation of temporary bonds. And depending on how the temporary bond forms, it contextualizes into certain meanings, and it provides a certain kind of a specific way of being. For example, hydrogen atoms, oxygen, these are separate entities, but when they temporarily form, depending on the temperature, it has the quality of being wet. Depending on the temperature, it has the quality of being cold. Depending on the temperature, it has the quality of being hot, but it's the same H2O. Just like this, existence is some things that are in temporary bonds. But even that hydrogen atom, even that oxygen atom, is composed of electrons and protons and neutrons, right? So we tend to think, okay, then there must be these things called hydrogens and oxygen, hydrogens and, neutrons and protons. But even that is composed of subatomic particles. And even subatomic particles are composed of something smaller. So it's, spatially speaking, it's an endless scale of going up and down. And time speaking, it's a constant reformation of things that we loosely classify as things. But these things don't exist in an atomic, definable way. This is what the Buddha realized. He didn't formulate, he didn't, discover it. He realized that this is existence. So the three marks of existence is impermanence, non-atomic self, and suffering. Because when you don't understand these two, you're bound to suffer because you have a misinformed view of reality. So, origin and meaning of existence being there is kind of thinking about this in the wrong way. Because origin and meaning of existence are human-made concepts. Without humans thinking about meaning of existence, without humans thinking of origin, there is no such thing to discuss. The only thing that exists is existence. So that is basically everything just is. And humans come and create concepts around it, create labels and names around it. But without humans, does it mean that these things didn't exist? No, without humans, the same thing exists. But there's nobody to see it, claim it as a concept, and start labeling it as such. Focuses only on personal liberation, not on universal morality and divine accountability, is again misinformed. Because focusing only on personal liberation is a part of Buddhism. Specifically speaking, Theravada Buddhism. But we have to understand, Theravada Buddhism is also a reaction. When you were in the Buddha's time. There was no differentiation of different branches of Buddhism because the Buddha was there to collect all the arguments and resolve every kind of a confusion. But when the Buddha passed, in the group of community of Buddhists, there were some confusions about how to move forward, especially because times have changed. So one of the examples of this is around salt. In the Buddha's time, the monks were encouraged to eat the alms as they were provided and not save it for later, because that is greed. And whatever they got, they ate gratefully without, leaving it behind and letting it go to waste. They don't ask for certain things. They don't order things. They don't, demand food. They get what the villagers give them as alms. This was around the Buddha's time, but then after Buddha passed, there came this concept of salt. Okay, so we're not supposed to keep food, but can we perhaps store a little bit of salt? So if tomorrow the food isn't that good, we can just sprinkle a little bit of the salt and then make it a little bit more edible to us. Make it a little bit more delicious. Some traditionalists said, no, salt is still food. And some liberal people were like, come on, but it's not like food, it's a condiment, right? So as these kinds of arguments progressed, there became more liberal interpretations of the Buddha's teaching. And there was a resistance to that. No, if you're gonna make loopholes for everything, then why even call yourself a Buddhist? Why even renounce society and why become a monk? No, we need to go back to the roots. And so a group of people trying to follow the Buddha's way in accordance with how Buddha has stated it is Theravada Buddhism. The Theravada Buddhism being strict conservatives, reaction to that, of course, forms, and we want to focus on what Buddha really meant in the context of the times instead of verbatim what he actually said. And that branch of thinking is Mahayana Buddhism. And Mahayana Buddhism is basically the more liberal interpreters of Buddha's thinkings, right? And within the Mahayana tradition, there are some branches like Tibetan Buddhism and Zen Buddhism, or Sun Buddhism as you call it in Korean, or Chan Buddhism in Chinese. So, and then there's like Vajrayana, which is like a combination of, some Hindu practices along with Buddhism. But anyway, Buddhism has a lot of different flavors because people evolved the ideas of the Buddha after his passing. So, focusing only on personal liberation is looking at a subset of Buddhism and saying that is Buddhism. That is not the case. Universal morality is explained by the void. There's this, of course, the Buddha offers a general guideline on how to behave in a good way. And this is the Eight Rightful Path, right? But Eight Rightful Path is kind of like a guideline based on how you would like to be treated. Would you like it if other people beat you up? No. So that means don't harm other people physically. Would you like it if other people lied to you? No. Then don't lie to other people. So Eightfold Path is about a general guideline based on the human experience of life from the ego's perspective. But there are times where we need to sort of break the rules, and that means, it's doing something, right? So, for example, I'm not supposed to kill another life, but I see someone in danger, because someone is trying to rob them, or they have a weapon and they're about to shoot other people. So, in that case, if I engage in a bit of a physical violence to protect myself and the others around me, then can we say that it's all bad? So, good and bad are contextualized. If I am a person using my physical power to subdue another person, then we can generally agree that it's a wrong thing. But if I am being oppressed and I am protecting myself, and I need to assert some amount of physical power in order for them to actually stop and prevent them from harming more lives. Then it's a contextualized, right? But so this quality of being everything depending on context means without context, there is no quality. All qualities are ascribed by context. And this is the Buddhist concept of the void, right? Sunyata. But in Mahayana Buddhism, this doesn't mean you can rationalize. This doesn't mean that you can, go about and do everything and then just contextualize it and rationalize it in a way that makes sense to you. No, the divine accountability is, yes, I engaged in physical violence to stop other people from harming them, but I still need to be accountable for my actions. So, if I see a fire and I need to put it out, and I see other people's buckets and water on the lawn, I may steal it to put out the fire. But I can't expect the other person to unilaterally forgive me because I did good. I have to take into account that, yes, I did steal. And for that, I do need to pay the price. So this is a more real world example of it, but karma is the divine accountability for, yeah, I stopped. But I stopped something worse by doing something bad. But when I do something bad, it has the tendency of people looking at me without context and thinking I'm a bad person, right? This is how the discourse around social justice forms, right? So, for example, a lot of sensitive topics around, like Black Lives Matter and other, sensitive topics around, racism and the systemic oppression of certain groups of people. So, when you look at it from each person's perspective, there is a lot of personal motivation to act a certain way. But regardless of that personal, justification, we have to understand that radicalism from the outside tends to incur a kind of a reaction that's extreme because it is an act of radicalness. Moderate activity is peaceful, but we have to understand moderation and centrists tend to have this reputation of not really doing anything. So every action, everything you do has an associated karma with it based on how other things interact with it. And that is the cycle of karma, how it is passed down. Another really excellent example of this is generational trauma, right? So when I'm an immigrant, when I'm a descendant of an immigrant, I tend to inherit a lot of the trauma of my immigrant, family, where it doesn't really apply to my life if I'm like a fifth or sixth generation immigrant. I'm a, fully grown, born and grown person in this country, but I observe all of my grandparents and parents engaging in this kind of a scarcity mindset because they were immigrants and it used to really, it carved a deep mark of karma. And that's something I can inherit because that is how divine accountability, as how ChatGPT explains it, works. So, Buddhism, is it a life philosophy than a complete worldview? It's both. It's a life philosophy, but also it is a comprehensive worldview. That's why it's so compatible with other religions. When you understand Buddhism, it won't really turn you away from your religion unless your religion is based on, not really truthful beliefs. But if you understand Buddhism, it will actually deepen your relationship with the religion that you have. You will get to understand more contextually the teachings of your religion. So it not only is it spiritually calming, but it also addresses the fullest human experience because it teaches you to be independent of contextual interpretations of something. It teaches you to stop thinking of contextual interpretation of reality as reality because they are separate things.